Good morning, everyone. My name is Denise Crudup. I'm a dementia care certified senior care advisor. And what that means that I have familiarity with the care necessary to go that seniors living with dementia need to have. The first thing I want to do is apologize. As I explained to Christy this morning, I have a terrible cold, and it is just in your average seasonal cold. And so not feeling the best, but I will try to do my best for you this morning. All right, the first thing I want to do is talk about senior care. Hang on, I need to reduce that. Thank you. All right, so what I want to talk about is senior care and what that means. And we're going to talk about some definitions before we get into the full presentation. So senior care is any kind of services that are necessary for the care and maintaining the quality of life for an older person to live comfortably and independently, whether that's in their own home or in an assisted living community or in skilled nursing. The majority of senior care is done by family members, and but they also, in addition to unpaid care from family members, care is also provided through paid services like in-home care. Medicare only covers the caregiving services that are medically required. So what that means is most senior care is paid for out of pocket, which is called private pay. And Medicaid will provide a wider range of services in terms of covering the cost of that care if the senior's incomes and assets are low enough to qualify for Medicaid. When we talk about care outside of the home, what we're talking about is what's known as custodial care, and that is a definition that is provided in health insurance plans, Medicaid plans, Medicare plans, and it's a term that is used throughout the industry so everyone has the same definition. So custodial care is a non-medical care that helps individuals with their activities of daily living, which we're going to discuss momentarily. And it's generally recommended by medical personnel. So for example, if your mom or dad has a fall and breaks a hip, the physician or skilled nursing community would suggest that your mom or dad will need custodial care, have someone come into the home just to help with what's known as the activities of daily living, which we're going to talk about momentarily. So the activities of daily living are what all of us do every day. So the eating, bathing, getting dressed, toileting, continence, and mobility. So these are all non-medical care related activities. And so the performance of these ADLs is important in determining what type of financial assistance, such as Medicare, Medicaid, or long-term insurance, that a person will need as he or she ages. So there are a series of types of custodial care that's available, and I'm going to start with what was the most common, but as you can see with the asterisks, that is no longer in place due to COVID-19. So there is a service that's known as adult daycare. It's a term that daycare is a term that's contested in the industry because we don't mean for it to sound as bad as it does, but it's care that a senior receive during the day if the family members have work obligations and cannot provide care for the senior in their home. That care is typically be done at a senior center or in a church, sometimes at the Y, or a community center. And that is a private pay. That is not something that any of the insurances would cover. And the average cost for that is $1,200 a month. And with that, the senior would have the opportunity to have usually breakfast and lunch. There would be social activities, games, movie days, and also field trips. Those things have all been suspended due to COVID-19. So that is a service that is not currently available. The next step from that, when it's more difficult to have take the senior to a senior center, would be in-home care. And that, so and the in-home care is usually the step prior to moving mom or dad into an assisted living community or skilled nursing facility. And so in-home care usually is non-medical care. It's where someone comes in and takes care of those activities of daily living, as well as doing some light housekeeping and maybe running errands, and certainly helping with medication management. The average monthly cost for in-home care for 44 hours per week, so that's looking at Monday through Friday as well as a few hours on the weekend, is $4,429. And again, this is also something that that because it is non-medical, it is private pay. That is something that Medicare, Medicaid, and long-term insurance would not pay for. Now, I know the goal for many families is to have mom or dad age in place, but that's not always the best option. And one of the number one reasons is social isolation. So if mom or dad, who may have been very active in their younger years or before an illness or a fall, they were out and about with their friends and having a very independent life. It is a hard transition to then just stay at home and just having family members come in and then caregivers come in without being out and about in the way that they used to be. The other challenges of aging in place is difficulty eating balanced meals. So if mom and dad have mobility issues, it's very difficult for them to do things like stand at the stove and make a meal. There's also a major issue around medication mismanagement, and that's due to eyesight and not being able to read the labels on the medication bottle. So there's sometimes medication interactions that can be certainly dangerous, but may make mom or dad sick. Bathing and personal hygiene. So many older adults live in older homes with older tubs. And so it's very difficult, and it's obviously a fall risk to get in and out of the bathtub safely. So then there's an issue around bathing and personal hygiene. And the same with going to the restroom. And then mobility issues, and it gets to the next point. Many of the older homes are not accessible for older people with limited mobility. So things like carpeting, not having safety rails and narrow hallways where someone who needs a walker or a wheelchair cannot get through the hallways. And so these are all of the things when thinking about aging in place or the type of custodial care your parents or grandparents may need. These are all of the variables that you need to take into consideration. And it may be that aging in the family home might not be the best option to make sure that your family member has a good quality of life in their later years. So now we're going to transition into talking about care outside of the home. And the first place that after in-home care and that is not being successful is moving into assisted living community. So an assisted living community is non-medical. It is custodial care, but it is non-medical. Assisted living communities are licensed and regulated by the state, and they provide 24-hour access to care staff. And so there's all of the assistance with the activities of daily living. There are 3 meals plus snacks that are included as a part of the monthly cost. That also includes housekeeping and laundry, as well as transportation to doctor's appointments. Pre-COVID, that included field trips to various cultural things within the community. It also provides religious services right in the community. And the type of community that a senior chooses is based on budget and personal preference. So you have very small communities that are much more home-like, and you also have much larger communities that, quite frankly, are considered luxury assisted living communities. And all of that goes with, budget and personal preference. The average monthly cost for a studio or apartment is $4,000 in an assisted living community, but that is all inclusive. That includes all utilities. There's no grocery shopping. That is everything is included with the exception of medical care, but this is where Medicare and Medicaid may kick in, because those insurances will cover any kind of medical care. So this is just the custodial care of living in a community, or living in the community. $4,000 per month seems like a lot, but usually at this point in time, when a senior is moving into assisted living community, this is also a time when there may be consideration of liquidation of assets, and so selling of the family home, looking at retirement plans, and using that to pay for the care. And oftentimes moving into assisted living community is actually less expensive. It's certainly less expensive than having in-home care, but it's also less expensive than just the upkeep of a family home. And I'm going to pause right now to check to see if anyone has any questions.
Early on, we had a good one. Someone was asking, is custodial care temporary?
For a senior, no. Usually once the senior needs that type of care, it is going to be ongoing. It may be intermittent, but rarely does a senior get custodial care just once and they don't need it anymore for the remainder of their life. So we're talking about, when we're talking about seniors, and my apologies, I should have defined this. In this context, we're talking about when we're talking about seniors, we're talking about members of the community that are 80 years of age and older. The average age for these services, particularly assisted living community, is 85 years of age. And so at that point, typically due to illness or injury, that custodial care would remain in place for the remainder of the senior's life.
Isn't it more like rehab? I mean, you or I could have surgery and need help getting to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. And so then it's an activity of daily living that we're really annoyed we can't take care of for ourselves. But right, we'd be in more of a nursing, recovery, rehab kind of setting because of the hope that that's just part of the recovery.
That's correct. So, and certainly there are outliers on either end of that spectrum, but typically if a senior has had an injury, so a slip and fall, or an illness, or a heart attack or stroke, and is going through rehabilitative services, after the age of 80, the odds of a full recovery, and again, there's outliers where they will not need a certain level of care. Now, granted, that senior may not necessarily need to move into assisted living or or be in a permanent skilled nursing community, but they will need ongoing care. So
just not the same.
It's not the same.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
New question, great one just popped up. Do all states regulate and license assisted living facilities, or is that just an Ohio thing?
All states do. Now, with the caveat that what's allowed or what's considered quality care in one state is not the same in all states. So all states regulate assisted living communities as well as skilled nursing facilities, but the quality of care is what's considered quality of care is very different. And so my role is to follow, specifically for Ohio, making sure that the communities that I refer families to meet the highest standards for Ohio, because there's certainly a range. So there's the highest level of care that meets and exceeds the requirements for the state of Ohio, and there are other communities that just scooch across the line. And so it's my job to keep families away from the ones that are just barely, cutting it.
No scoochers.
No scoochers. Certainly, whenever the question comes up about a community, I try to be as professional as possible, because this is all public information. It's hard to find, but it's public information. Is available on the state of Ohio's website. I just, would say, well, let's consider some other options. There are other options there, or certainly, this is the case for everything that any kind of consumer purchase, because if these are private pay communities, you don't necessarily want to go with the least expensive. The first thing you need to ask is, well, why is that the least expensive? And then we can talk about it from there.
Pennies saved might be pound foolish.
Yes, because the absolute goal through this entire process is to make sure that your senior loved ones have the best quality of life in their later years as possible. And when we're talking about moving into an assisted living community, is a choice. It's a choice, and it is a family choice. And you want to make, and ideally it is, although it's not the best way to talk about it, but it is being honest, it's their last move. And so Christy, you and I may move several times, because we're at that age where we can
I'm
still
change
move around.
resistant. Are you kidding? It's already a problem that my unit's three floors up. Like, this isn't gonna work.
Exactly.
No, I hear it's extra sensitive.
It's extra sensitive because for you and I, as you just mentioned, a move is extraordinarily stressful. And so for your senior loved ones, you want to make the best choice. And so it's literally, that's their last move. And no matter how many more years they have in their life, you want to make sure that those years are quality years, and the family is not concerned about the care that their loved one is receiving.
You may get to this question later. There are two, and you can pick how you tackle them and when, but we've got our assisted living community star rated, which kind of ties in with the Ohio standards.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have one kind of asking, a lot of this has been framed for watching your loved one, but what if I can look around and see that I'm not, I'm retired and there's no family around, no one's going to be a family caretaker. So, talk about when they should be making decisions and directives and things that will help them take care of themselves.
The short and quick answer is immediately. If it's in the forefront of your consciousness right now, that is your clue that you need to start making these plans immediately. The magical age to start putting these things in place, and yes, we're going to talk about it a little bit more later on in the presentation, is 70. So if you're retired, in addition to all of the other things you put in place for moving into your retirement years, advanced planning is one of those things. And the reason why it's the age of 70, because yes, 70 is young, but you also want to be able to make these decisions while you still can. You don't want to wait until an emergency happens, and an emergency can be something as simple as a fender bender, and all of a sudden you have a series of health problems, because 70 is the age for all of us, for all human beings, where recovery from things is going to be a little bit more difficult, and you want to be able to make these decisions while you still have the ability to do so, and you have the independence to do so.
So some contingency plans,
always contingency planning. Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who are starting to get into asking way family particulars, Denise's specialty is meeting with you one-on-one, and we'll share her contact info liberally at the end here. And also at any time, if you contact me at AMLA and say, I have a question for that older living thing, then we'll go through it. I see a hand up for Mary Jo. Do you want to just type yes in the chat box if you want to be unmuted to ask a question? She went away. No mistake. Okay. since we're asking you to, cut down on background noise, I feel very sensitive to looking for visual clues. So, okay.
All right. So, as I mentioned previously, moving into an assisted living community is a choice. So it's either a family choice, or as a retiree and with no family around, it is a choice. My specialty is assisted living communities. There are senior apartments. They are few and far between here in Northeast Ohio, but a 55-year-old community, 55 of years of age and older community, those are also available, but that's not my specialty, because typically at 55, that's hardly a senior. No matter what AARP says, it's hardly a senior. They have the ability to make those decisions, but those are certainly things to take into consideration, because these are where it's a choice. And so the benefits of moving into an assisted living community, and the number one thing is medication management. You no longer have to worry about mom or dad taking their medications correctly and on time. These are things that's built in. So although it's not medical care, they don't provide medical care, they will provide what's known as medication management. And so as well as the assistance of with daily living. And by the way, not all seniors that live in assisted living communities necessarily need assistance with the activities of daily living. So many seniors that are living in senior assisted living communities, they still drive. They're still very much so independent. And oftentimes they move into an assisted living community because of the issues around social isolation, because they don't want to have to cook and clean. They don't want to have to deal with managing a household anymore. Oftentimes, most of the time it is a widow. Occasionally it's a widower, because the average, in terms of the average resident in an assisted living community, is an 87-year-old widow, and she just wants to be around other women her age, and it's the social activities. The assisted living communities also provide 24-hour staffing. There are some medical services, and so the assisted living communities, they partner with whatever local hospital is near them, and physicians will come in and do monthly visits, and that includes dental care, etc., as well as there are nurses that are on staff. And then there's all of the social, recreational, and religious activities. Now, again, these have been curtailed due to COVID-19, but what I can tell you, in the higher rated, the assisted living communities, they are moving heaven and earth to make sure that their seniors are still having a quality of life, in terms of having as much social interaction as is safely possible under the circumstances. Now we're going to go into talk about communities where there are no choices. And the first one is a memory care community. And a memory care community are communities that are specialized communities, which means that their staff has been specially trained around all of the various dementias, including Alzheimer's. And so, so many of you may know seniors that have Alzheimer's or other dementias, and literally that is their only health concern. They are healthy in every other way. And so these are communities that the staff has been specially trained around dementia, but they also provide the necessary socialization that dementia patients will need to, again, to have a quality of life. These communities are what are known as secure facilities. They are locked, and pretty much everything, the senior cannot leave or escape or get lost, if you will. And when I say that the staff has been trained, in most of these memory care communities, I shouldn't say most, in all of the memory care communities, all of the staff, that includes the janitorial staff, that includes the kitchen staff, everyone that works in these memory care communities know how to work with dementia patients. And so the biggest thing that you're going to find in these communities is a level of safety that you would not have in an assisted living community. They are also licensed and regulated by the state. Again, 24-hour access to staff. And then again, the assistance with daily living. Again, because they're not these in these memory care communities, it isn't that the dementia residents don't need medical care. It's just that they don't need the level of medical care that will require them to move into a nursing home. So 3 meals plus snacks, housekeeping and laundry. And again, also all of the social activities. So going to, again, pre-COVID, going to the museums, getting out into the community. So it's just in a much safer environment. And when you're talking to, when you have a senior that has dementia, there is no such thing as aging safely in the family home. There is going to be a certain point where it's not manageable for the family caregivers, and it is not manageable to have someone just come in a few hours a day. There are a lot of safety concerns around that. The average cost is $6,500 per month, and yes, it is very expensive, but you're also getting a fully specialized staff. You're getting a secure facility, and although the medical care needs may not be any higher than someone living in an assisted living community, there are care considerations for someone with dementia that a healthy senior that's living an independent life, just happens to be an assisted living community, that senior just doesn't need that level of care that they would receive in a memory care community. So that is the additional cost. And before I go on to the next slide, are there any questions around memory care communities?
I haven't seen anything that's memory specific. There were quite a few comments around how attractive it sounds to move in while you're young and healthy. And I can say from family experience that, like, my grandma thrived. She was in a wheelchair, but you're in my grandpa, it was a holdout. It took a long time for him to realize that the big house in the yard was just too much, understandably. But once they were there, I was playing chair kickball with her on one visit, because they do exercise classes. You know, granted, it's not weightlifting or anything, but and you know, you'd see signs up and around, come down at 4:00 for movies and popcorn. I'm like, I'm moving in. This is dorm life with no class, or meets cruise life. So there are huge advantages, but the big downside is usually it's selling the big home property starts to give you enough to cover it, and you start to go, okay, well, if they have transportation and I don't need to drive and I don't need to do my own laundry, a lot of your variable expenses go down, but the cost is the concern. And with that, someone asked, do you see ever a day where Medicare covers assisted living?
Well, that is a conversation, particularly as more and more, there are more people over the age of 65 than not. Maybe within the next decade or so, but right now, no. And that's Medicare and Medicaid are federally funded, federally managed systems, and well, you know.
Yep. They're going to keep those rules as stringent as they can.
Yes.
I'm thinking maybe a silver lining of COVID is it's teaching us all the risks of isolation. The truly statistical in the young and old uptick in deaths of desperation, visits to therapists. So the isolation might become a medical issue that they have to create some kind of community where it's not a lot of actual medical help, but the being around people is the medical help, because
Right.
this is medicine too.
Yeah, and Christy, that's an excellent point. That is a conversation that is become a very big conversation in senior care and senior services, directly related to COVID, because the thing that the seniors are not getting is the interaction with their family. So, having windowsill visits, having visits outside, that's not enough, because the other thing the seniors are not getting is they're not getting touched. They're not getting hugs. And that is actually, they're finding that because of the restriction with COVID-19, that is starting to become a huge issue. And so
I live
absolutely
alone, and I used to go to church for hugs. And
Yeah.
now, right. So, and family was freer. My brother and sister-in-law love me dearly.
Mhm.
Came running to help me get to the ER when I cut my thumb on a knife, but they wouldn't hug me as they left, or
Mhm.
pet it, or and
Yep.
like,
Yeah. The other thing I want to say, as a follow-up to the benefits of moving into an assisted living community, um, is because a senior's quality of life has increased, their life expectancy has increased. So the other thing, and we're going to talk about the planning piece momentarily, is a lot of family members, move mom or dad into an assisted living community, in their late 80s, early 90s, thinking they only have a couple more years to live. And they exceed expectations because all of the stress that we all have managing in our own households is gone. And they're having a great time. And because they're in there, so their health improves, both physical and mental health improves. And so they wind up living much longer than anyone anticipated, because they truly are, they're having a great time.
right.
Yeah. So it isn't what I would used to say to people, again, pre-COVID, is when I would give presentations, um, these communities were literally open doors. And so networking events, community events would be held in the assisted living communities, because the communities wanted to invite their neighbors in so they could see. It's like, no, 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 these aren't horrible places. These places are fabulous. They're gorgeous. They're well kept. They have great food. They have happy hour. And all of that is
Tim
included.
doesn't give us happy hour.
Right. So, and it's unfortunate that, it's for a variety of reasons. It's unfortunate around COVID-19, but the worst thing is when thinking about assisted living communities, and if you're not fully familiar with them, they don't have a way to sell themselves. They're not these dark and dank and stinky places of, oh, these places are gorgeous. And in fact, my running joke is I would tell people, oh, it's like going on a cruise. You just show up. But we can't talk about cruises now because of COVID-19 either. So there's that. So I'm going to go on. So assisted living communities and memory care communities memory care communities are less about choice, but it is more about making sure that your senior is safe. Skilled nursing facilities and nursing homes are not a choice. No one chooses to move into a skilled nursing facility. And as I would describe a skilled nursing facility, it is a mini hospital. It is where someone needs 24-hour nursing care. Now, skilled nursing facilities / nursing homes are also places where seniors would go for rehabilitation services. So Chrissy had mentioned earlier that if she or I were injured, we would go through rehab. We would go through a rehabilitation facility that does not specialize in senior care. Skilled nursing facilities and those rehab facilities are specialized in the care of the injuries and illnesses that are specific to seniors. Typically, when someone goes into skilled nursing for rehab, it is temporary. I think, and I am not a Medicaid or Medicare specialist by any means, because that's out of my scope of practice. But I believe the maximum is 3 weeks for care under a particular, depending upon the level of care. Excuse me, as I mentioned earlier, I have a cold. And so these communities provide 24-hour care, and they take care of all of the other things of assisted living. But again, these are medical facilities. A nursing home, and you will find in many skilled nursing facilities, you will find both. You will find the wing that is just rehabilitative services, and you will find a wing that is long-term care. That is what we think of as the old-fashioned nursing home, and that is when it's not safe for a senior to be in the home, certainly not in assisted living, because they need that level of care. And typically, although the nursing home tries to provide a certain level of social interaction, usually the residents are bedridden. And as I said, this is not a place that someone chooses to go to. They have had a significant illness, a significant injury, where they will never be independent again. The average cost for a skilled nursing facility is approximately $7,500 per month. Now, one of the things that many families make the mistake of doing is they have in-home care and family caregiving, and then they realize that they can no longer care for their loved one in the way that, or provide the type of care that they need, and then they make the decision, well, let's look at assisted living. If your loved one needs a significant amount of medical care, they've skipped the step of assisted living. Assisted living does not provide, that's not their intention. They don't provide that level of care, and then they go into a skilled nursing facility. And as I mentioned before, with the quality of life and how that extends life and how people's health improves significantly, making the decision to move into assisted living, rather than it's extending out family caregiving and having someone come into the home, may offset or completely avoid having a family member requiring going into a nursing home. Because sometimes everyone's intentions are the best, but having an in-home caregiver as well as family caregiving, the quality of that care may not be as the type of care that they would receive outside of the home. And so that's also a consideration when thinking about how to manage the care of your seniors. So before we go on to the next slide, I want to stop here, because now we're gonna move into talking a little bit more about Medicare, Medicaid, long-term care insurance, and then advanced planning. So are there any questions as it pertains to the actual direct care of a senior?
I wasn't seeing any new ones. Type fast, even if it's just the words "me," if you need me to comment about the sadness of poverty in aging. And I don't have a good reaction button for that, because agree, but a thumbs up looks like I agree with you. Poverty is a bad thing. It is serious, and that's where you get into the Medicaid stuff that you're about to talk about. Anyone questions about levels of care? You know, going, take it away.
All right. Well, that's talking about poverty in the elderly is I guess, appropriate segue, when to begin planning for assisted living or potentially skilled nursing. You need to look ahead as far into the future as possible. So if you know, like for example, my mom is 75. She lives on what's known as a continuing care community. She lives in an independent apartment, but there's an assisted living community right on campus, on the campus of this senior community. And certainly she's, relatively speaking, she's young and she's still independent. She still drives, but she's had health concerns the majority of her adult life. She's going to need care later on. She's going to need care that I will, because I'm an only child, and I won't be able to provide for her. And eventually, it is going to be cost prohibitive to have in-home care come in. So the planning part of moving has you have to take a look at the healthcare concerns. Now, certainly there are going to be things like a heart attack, stroke, other things that cannot be planned for. But if you know you have a senior living with a progressive condition, so Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's disease, COPD, multiple sclerosis, these are the things that you need to start planning. If you're noticing an increase in the level of care needs, so mom or dad had been able to take care of themselves just fine, and now you notice that they can't. And by the way, I want to stop here. When Christy and I talked about this presentation this summer, and I had requested to do the presentation the middle of November very specifically, because I would tell families, as you are spending time with your seniors, because people would tend to go to the family home for holiday dinners, that's the time to take a look at the level of care. Are you noticing things like weight loss? Are you noticing things like poor personal hygiene? Are you looking in the refrigerator and the cupboards and finding that there's no food, or the food that's there has expired? Obviously, that's not going to be the case for most of your family, or most of our family gatherings this year. But these are things that you need to pay attention to, because it's not always going to be obvious. So even if you're talking to mom or dad on the phone on a regular basis, but you're not visiting them, and I'm not sure how to do this if people are having virtual family gatherings, but if you have the opportunity to spend any kind of time with a senior loved one, pay attention to these things and don't disregard them and as oh, it's just a one-off. Those are the indications that your loved one may need a higher level of care. Now, if they've been living independently, it doesn't necessarily mean that the next step is immediately going into assisted living, but that's when you know that it's time to have a family conversation about mom or dad taking care of themselves. And you want to do this when your senior loved one can be a part of the conversation. The worst thing to do is for family members to have these conversations and make decisions when the senior is not a part of those conversations. Now, if there's an issue around dementia and things like that, that's obviously something completely different. But you want to make sure you're having these conversations when mom or dad can be a part of the decision-making process, because then it's a family decision and it doesn't feel forced. And then you have some tangible things to talk about. Hey, you're not eating well. You're losing weight when you shouldn't be. There's issues around nutrition. Your medications all mess up. These are all valid reasons to think about, okay, now we may need to start making some plans for mom or dad's care going forward in the future. All right, so paying for senior care. As I mentioned at the beginning, most of this is out of pocket. So and this is something to consider honestly at every age level, but for seniors that absolutely need this level of care and they cannot live independently at home, liquidating assets, so selling of the family home, looking at investments, etc., and liquidating those things, those will pay for the assisted living or in-home care. There will be some times when Medicare and Medicaid will cover medical procedures, but certainly not the custodial care. And so the question always comes up, well, what happens if the senior does not have the funds? It means that the family, and this happens more often than many people realize, it means that oftentimes the children liquidate their retirement to cover the care of their seniors, of their parents. And so that's why you need to have these conversations early and often. And for those of us that are middle-aged, these are the things that we have to think about in terms of our own retirement planning. We may not live in our family home, and if we don't want to put that burden on our children, we need to plan for that as soon as possible. So Medicare does not cover long-term care because help with activities of daily living is not considered medically necessary. Now, can a physician suggest that mom or dad need care? Yes, but that's with care of the basic needs, and they're just no longer independent. Long-term care insurance, Medicaid is not going to cover it. Medicaid will cover for long-term care needs that require skilled nursing. Now, in the same way that there are different ranges of quality for assisted living communities, skilled nursing communities are also managed and regulated by the state. But communities that take Medicaid, or if you're a senior, that's all they can afford, you're not going to receive those are going to be the communities, the skilled nursing facilities that kind of scooch across the line of yes, they have met the minimum requirements, but that's it. And so if that's what all the family can afford, and that's what the senior needs in terms of care, then so be it. But if you want to avoid having your senior loved one in a community that's what we call a Medicaid community, that scooches across the line of meeting the minimum state requirements, that means that there is a financial planning component to that. Again, that is out of my scope of practice, but it is something that, again, when we're talking about planning, these are conversations that you need to have with your family members early and often. So there are safety nets out there. It's just that sometimes the safety net is barely a net. There's going to be a lot of holes in that net. And so that requires a fair amount of planning on the family's part. Now, everything around the finances and paying for assisted living and skilled nursing, again, that's out of my scope of practice. Within my network of senior care and senior services professionals, I have financial planners, estate planners, elder law attorneys, to whom I refer my clients to, and they can certainly walk you through this because everybody's financial situation is going to be different. The question that I often get is, what about long-term care insurance? Now, insurance is definitely not my area of expertise, but what I can say is for those that have long-term care policies often function in the same way as health insurance copays. You have to pay out of pocket for a certain amount of time before the long-term care insurance will kick in, but that is going to depend on your policy and how it's written. So if you or your family member has a long-term care insurance policy, have that reviewed as soon as possible so you know what to plan for in the future. Medicaid, as I said, will cover certain medical things. Medicare will cover certain medical things, but in terms of the custodial care that's non-medical, that is 100% out of pocket. So before we go on to looking at other things around advanced care planning, are there any questions?
We have one person from Texas just commenting that they did see a case where Medicaid in Texas covered a little bit of in-home care.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, there are tons of loopholes and
Well,
things.
right. And so if that in-home care was a visiting nurse or visiting physician, Medicaid or Medicare will pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I obviously, Texas and how that's managed in Texas or how that's regulated in Texas is going to be very different than Ohio.
And I will say, prior to getting the AMLA job, I was starting to train in Medicare, and there is a trend in the health plans covering a few limited extra services like transportation to medical appointments or a certain number of freezer meals after surgery. Mm-hmm. So again, it's not the same as being so frail and forgetful that you're not getting good meals and getting that all the time, more like Meals on Wheels. But this was a step toward the in-home rehab help, you know, so you need both. You need the occasional extra support and the grim reality that we're not going to be as I do it by myself for life as we want to be.
Yeah. So now I'm going to go. Oh.
No, I was just opening it one more time. When it's quiet, I never want to rush. Some people have a long runway, they just need to know that we'll sit here staring at you until you ask.
Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about advanced care planning. And once again, this is out of my scope of practice, but I do have, and within my network, I have elder law attorneys and estate planning attorneys that can help with this. So in the same way that you want to have conversations with your family members when they can be a part of the planning process, you want to also have the conversations around powers of attorney, a living will, and it's legally known as a CPR directive, but it's what's known as a DNR, do not resuscitate. You want to have these decisions while the senior has the ability, the capacity and competency to make these decisions. Now, capacity and competency are well beyond the scope of this. However, if it is determined that a senior does not have the competency to make this decision, then it gets very, very messy. So again, planning early and often, and as you are interacting with your seniors during the holidays or any other time, don't discount things. Sometimes if you're seeing things or things aren't right, it may be just an issue around medication management and there's nothing seriously wrong, but don't discount anything. You want to have these conversations as soon as possible. Now, a power of attorney, there are two types of powers of attorney. You have a financial power of attorney and you have a what's known as a durable power of attorney for medical decisions. Durable powers of attorney get their name from the fact that they endure beyond capacity, and capacity means that the senior no longer has the cognitive and intellectual ability to make decisions. And so these are things that are put in place by either an estate planning attorney or an elder law attorney. And they are they are safeguards to make sure that if your senior becomes incapacitated, someone can take care of handle their affairs. For example, if with a power of attorney, your senior no longer has the capacity to pay their bills, write checks, get money from the bank. Without a financial power of attorney, or if you're not on your senior's bank account, you cannot help them. You have to have these things in place. You cannot make medical decisions for them without having these documents in place. And so you want to make sure that you have them in place. So when not only have them in place, meaning have them, but also know where they're located. This is just in my business, just running into families where, I know mom and dad have it, we just can't find it in the house. Making sure that first of all, asking if it's in place, if it is in place, literally, where is it? So when you need it, you're not, because you always will need it in an emergency. You and your family members are not scrambling to find it. So, again, part of this process of planning early and often, visiting your family members over the holiday season, ask where the documents are located and get your hands on them, because you don't want to be frantic trying to find them when you need them. Same with a living will. So this is when someone decides that they have a serious illness and they do not want any life-sustaining treatment. And so by signing a living will, it gives instructions to the healthcare providers to withhold or withdraw all life-sustaining treatment. Without the living will, even if your senior has expressed verbally to family members, this is what they want, it must be in writing. You cannot just say, well, we know this is what mom or dad wanted because they've talked about it. It must be in writing, or what will happen is the medical staff are required to do everything they can to keep your loved one alive, even if you know that that is not what they want. So again, these are very unpleasant conversations to have. And certainly, and I would say to people, yes, as you see your family members during the holidays, you want to have these conversations. The dinner table is not the best time. So maybe after everyone is, they've eaten, they've had a little chablis, maybe that's the time to start the conversation, but definitely not at the dinner table. But certainly during this time when you're spending time with your family, these are things, and by the way, you don't have to, this isn't much like this, it isn't a presentation. Bring it up little bits at a time, over time, to have these conversations, because what we are talking about for all of us is death, and it is unpleasant, but you want to make sure that, as it started off, making sure that your family member has a very good quality of life in their later years. And then when that quality of life is deteriorating, you are meeting their needs and giving them what they want, but it can't be that what they want has to be documented. So what goes along with the living will is a CPR directive, and that's the DNR. And so what many people don't realize, particularly with older adults, CPR is extremely dangerous. So it isn't what we see on medical dramas like House and Grey's Anatomy. For a senior who may have frail bones, giving CPR can be extraordinarily dangerous. And so again, having this conversation with the senior, having this conversation with the senior and their doctor, but you need to have a directive in place again, or the doctors are legally required to do everything in their power to keep your loved one alive, even though those life-sustaining measures may be dangerous and actually not extend their life at all. And so there's an entire conversation, again, beyond the scope of this presentation and beyond my scope of practice. But these are the conversations that where you need to also now loop in your senior's medical team. And so these are all conversations, and you don't want these conversations, you cannot have these conversations in the 11th hour. These are things that need to happen as soon as possible. All right, so I've come to the end of my presentation. So are there any questions lingering? And if there are, or if something pops up throughout the day, you certainly can send Christy an email.